start at? Back here?
I'll start in there in front of the drum set, yeah.
Hey, so Will, remind me, bro. So we're gonna just do. You're gonna do the drum overview, and am I gonna be there? I forgot.
No, I want you to chill here, and I think
I'll
I'll
chill
just
here.
be more comfortable.
Sounds good.
Cool.
So after we run the animation, it takes about 15 seconds.
Okay.
I'll cue you that we're live.
Okay, sweet.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you have your wireless on? Okay, go.
Yeah, it should be on.
And it's on.
Yes.
That is on the left side. Okay. Make sure we do one little mic test.
Okay. Yeah.
Before we get started.
Let me know.
So, Paul, you know what? Since Jack was not in his place, you could just point to Will when it's time to go since he's going to be here. So once the finishes, just let him know.
So if I'm kind of like pointing at these microphones, like the ones back here, are people going to be able to see some of this stuff?
Yeah, in that case.
And what you'll have to do, Will, is give her time to move the camera back as you walk through.
Oh, okay, cool.
And, you know, you could say like, "Oh, I'll be heading into the control room in a minute," and then she'll know she's going to have to head back there.
Okay, perfect.
So what we can
And
do.
super cash, it's all good. It's just a bunch of audio cool people going, "Oh, I want to see drum like this."
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. No, it's going to be fun.
Yeah. It's just that the one for the minute. Okay, cool. And okay, so then do you want me to come?
So when he goes around to the back,
Yeah.
maybe that's gonna be kind of long.
So you guys, we're live in a minute, so I'd say just put her right there in that corner is the best spot
Yeah,
for her to just get the
it's gonna
side.
it's gonna be kind of hard.
Okay, let's not worry about it then. Yeah, let's just keep it easy. Let's go.
Yeah, but if she brings it up by the door now, that should be okay. Yeah, is in just a little side angle, and then Will can say, "I'll be in the control room in a minute," and that gives her the cue to go walking back. I think it'll work. I think this will work. I think this should be fine. Let's toss it this way. Now, can you grab those sticks, please? Like, are you okay? I can help. You want to roll it up a little bit?
Yeah, just a second.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
So I know this is all so last minute.
Yeah, I know. We've been sitting around for a while.
let's just keep it. It's fine. Yeah. It's like two mics that I think you can still see from the front.
I can zoom in some from here.
Yeah, exactly. If you can just see this mic right here.
Yeah, I can zoom in.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Okay,
I
we're
can
gonna.
bring
Let's
those
keep it
two.
simple.
Yeah, I can see exactly.
Jack, we'll be fine. I'd really like to start on time.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Oh, good, Will.
Cool.
All right,
Why don't you
so
take a
press
deep breath?
record. You start record. I'm gonna start record.
Everybody silence their phones. Silence phones.
Silence phones. Can you
talk a little bit on
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. This is my normal talking voice. How are the levels? Is the signal good? Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
All right, guys.
Awesome.
We're recording.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, you guys, awesome. Broken and not dead.
What time is it? Let's do it. 4, 2.
Hey everybody, I'm Will Chasen. I'm an award-winning audio engineer, and I'm here at Hyde Street Studios to talk to everyone about some drum miking techniques. So we have a kit set up right here already, and I'll be running through some of the mics and kind of ideas behind, why we're using each mic and different functions behind that. Then we'll go in and get some drum tones, and then we'll actually track to a cake song that was recorded in this room. And kind of before I dive into the technical side of everything, I think I just wanted to first and foremost say that there's no right way to do any of this. It's easy to get caught up in the details, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to make songs sound good. And however you get there, whether it's with 1 mic or 20 mics, no one's going to know in the end. They're just going to be reacting emotionally to it. And so I think that's really important to consider. Being able to make music in a studio like this is really awesome, and you have all the different palettes at your fingertips of all these vintage mics and the Neve board and all this outboard gear. But at the end of the day, using what you have and knowing it as well as possible is extremely important. And I've seen people get incredible recordings, as I'm sure everybody else has, in many different locations in and outside of studios. So chances are you probably won't have a lot of this equipment at home. If you do, that's fantastic. But if you don't, just kind of think about some of these general ideas more so than the individual technical side of things. So this setup, I think a lot of times it's about like starting points. And so a lot of times I'll use this mic configuration in maybe a little bit of various forms. Maybe I'll add a couple mics or take away a couple mics from how this currently is. But this is generally, I know, is going to be a good starting point. I've recorded in this room a lot, so I kind of know that, capturing different elements might come in handy down the line, even if they're not, exactly for that song that you're recording in the moment. And, being in a studio, it's easy to set up a bunch of mics and you don't have to use them all as well. And that's kind of in line with that. So it's kind of giving us some options, not too many options because you don't want to be overwhelmed, but, maybe you want to just like cut 2 room mics for a drum fill in the middle of a song and then have the closed mics afterwards. So kind of thinking about like, not just like, how do we get this finished right here, right this second in the moment, but how can we record a variety of microphones to give us some creative options in the future. And I think even before I start talking about the mics individually, the easiest way to get good drum tones is to have a good drummer and well-tuned drums. So you're never gonna, it doesn't matter how expensive the microphone is, how expensive the compressor is, or vintage or new, if the source material of what you're recording isn't sounding good, it will never sound good in the end. So spending time during the setup, tuning the drums to either the track or the general vibe of, say, the session is extremely important because you're going to be capturing that sound. And so that's your starting point. And then, as far as the technicalities of drumming in the studio, I do think it is a little bit different than playing live. I myself am not a drummer, but I think in general, the way that the microphones, when you have a setup like this especially, pick up the different elements, you're going to be tending to be able to, it tends to sound good when you hit the drums hard and the cymbals a little bit lighter. And that might be a little bit different than how people play live or, you know, in the rehearsal space or at home. So, you know, just kind of general things to get the sounding as good and pure as possible before it even hits a microphone. We'll just kind of start with the foundation, the kick drum. So we have 3 mics on our kick drum here. We have a D112, which I actually really do like this microphone. I think for some reason it's like a controversial microphone for other audio engineers. You can choose, you know, a wide variety of microphones for any of these applications, like I said before, but I do like the way, this is a dynamic mic, and I like the way that it kind of captures the transients, like the attack of the kick. And it sounds good to me when going through some of the compressors, which I'll show you in the studio a little bit later. The next mic over is a vintage 47 FET, and this is a large diaphragm condenser microphone that, you know, it actually sounds good on a variety of sources. Like you can use it as a vocal mic and all these different things. And what it does on the kick drum, I think it really kind of captures a lot of the boominess and low end in sort of what can be an exciting way, even though you have to tame it. You know, it can be kind of overpowering of the other microphones. Using a pop filter with this in front of a kick drum can actually help with the way that it sounds, in that it reduces sort of that impact, that blast of air coming off the kick drum, and which can sometimes, it almost seems like it's overwhelming the capsule a little bit, and you don't get as high of a definition. So having that pop filter there can kind of help with the clarity of the transients in that microphone. And then this cool looking silver one, it's called a moon mic, and it's basically just a variation of the, you know, kick sub microphone, which is generally, I think they maybe started with NS10 speakers and wired them in reverse to become a microphone, and that sort of captures the low lows. And again, you kind of have to be careful with these because those sub kick mics can get a little bit muddy in the mix. So that's our kick drum setup. On our snare drum over here, we have just a normal SM57, which is an extremely common microphone, I'm sure as many of you all know. And then underneath it, it's a, you know, I've been experimenting with different under and on top snare microphones, and for some reason I keep coming back to the 57. I think when the 57 is processed, it can be actually still a very exciting microphone to work with, even though it seems like kind of like the basic one. And I think a lot of the reasons why I have it set up in this particular setup is to show that it, when treated correctly, can absolutely hold a candle to any of these microphones in terms of functionality and, you know, getting a good drum tone. Underneath, we have a condenser mic, a C414, the AKG, and that is a vintage one, which tend to have a little bit of a different sounding capsule than the newer ones. And the capsules on the old ones are a lot times more clear, and you can buy replacements if you were curious. If you have like a new 414 one, there's some pretty good manufacturers out there making kind of like new old stock of the capsules. And what I like about it underneath is because it's a condenser mic, a large diaphragm condenser mic, it tends to pick up a lot of the detail. And by putting it underneath, you're not getting as much of like the cymbal bleed and stuff, but you're getting like a really nice pure sound of the rattles underneath the snare. Moving on to our toms, we have these 421s on the rack toms, which are dynamic mics. It's a pretty classic setup. I really like the 421s in general. I mean, I think they're really versatile. You know, you can use them on kick drum if you want to have like a little more even like clicky of a kick drum attack, and you know, they can sound really good on vocals and guitar. But as far as toms, they just always seem to kind of capture the information in a nice way where it blends in with the rest of the kit in a really nice way. And then on this floor time, we have another D112, which is what we have on the kick drum. And the reason for putting that on the floor tom is it's just a little bit better capturing the low energy coming off of that. So it's maybe giving you a bit more low end than the 421 does, but the D112s, they're just like, I always imagine them as like super SM57s, you know, so they're like bigger, they kind of look similar, they sound a little similar, but they're really good they're like my SM57 for low end stuff. And again, those can sound really good on like metal guitar and stuff like that, where stuff's like tuned down on guitar, it kind of captures it in a way that a 57 doesn't really seem to have as much of the complete information. On the hi-hat over here, we have a vintage KM84i. That's a Neumann mic. It's a small diaphragm condenser microphone. And these are just really articulate in the way that they sound. You get a lot of detail off of it. Honestly, I don't tend to use hi-hat mixes that much, or the hi-hat mic in the mix that much, which kind of brings us to our overheads. The way I generally think about using these overhead microphones is this is the full picture of everything. And so I'll try to make sure that I'm getting enough hi-hat in this microphone where I don't necessarily need the spot microphone, but I have it there just in case a part that the drummer's playing needs to kind of come up in a section or that detail isn't there. But it's a little bit more of like a safekeeping thing. Our overhead microphones on this setup are vintage AKG C12 tube mics. And these are just really beautiful sounding microphones. They have really an immense clarity to them, but they certainly don't sound like stale because of the tube. But the tube, it doesn't really sound as much, it doesn't seem to have the same amount of an impact than, say, like some of the other vintage tube mics like U67 or U47. These are just really clean and natural sounding. And so they're perfect for over the kit because they have such a wide frequency response too. So you're getting all the low end off the drums, but then all the details off the cymbals. And then as far as kind of other options, we have a vintage 67 right here that's just sort of like, you know, you can see it's kind of lined up with the kick a little bit, the top of the kick. It's sort of pointed kind of right here. And, you know, typically what I would do with something like this is there'd be two things. One of them would be if we were going for more of like a vintage room style recording, this might actually be my main mic. But I think for what we're doing today, I'll probably plug it into one of the old compressors and just kind of destroy it and, you know, see how weird we can get it to sound. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, you know. Having that full picture of everything in mono can give you sort of like a nice like chest feeling layered in underneath the kit, especially when you have like these overheads, which are going to give you a bit wider of like a stereo image of the whole thing. So like having something kind of dead set in the middle can be really cool for punchiness. And then beyond that, we have a pair of Cole's ribbon mics right here, which are our room mics. And these are figure 8, so I really like using them for room mics because you're getting the information from the front, but you're also getting a lot of the information of the reflections in this room coming off the back, which can sound really cool for both blending in underneath our kind of closer mics, but also, again, sort of as an effect thing, where we could be like, yeah, let's get this drum fill and, you know, make it sound really roomy, or say for like a bridge, you know, make the drum sound all room mics and then come back to close mics. You're kind of providing yourself with some creative options down the road. So we've kind of already gone through and positioned these mics generally. And you know, the next step is going to be getting some kind of drum tones individually. So I'm going to go into the control room and we'll kind of start with our foundation, the kick, and kind of build our way up from there. So we have a fantastic drummer today, John, who's going to come in, and he will be kind of playing the drums for us.
Hi,
Cool.
Will.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good.
Good.
Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So yeah, why don't you have a seat, and then I'll be talking to you on Talkback, and yeah, we'll just kind of start one drum at a time and just sort of see where we're at. I think another thing too that's important with getting drum tones and with mixing too is it's okay to kind of take a peek at each individual part, but it's about how it all sounds together. So it's important to keep that in mind. You don't want to spend too much time on each individual piece, you know, on each individual kick drum mic or the kick drum in of itself, because we're building a drum set sound. We're not building a kick drum sound to go on the track. So, okay, cool.
All right.
You should hear me momentarily. All right, I'm going to arm these tracks so that we can hear them. John, can you hear me on the talkback? Okay, cool. All right, let's start with that. Just the kick drum, please. You can get kind of like a 4 on the floor. So I'm using the board mutes to kind of hone in on each sort of section right here. One of the nice things about having, one of the many nice things about having a Neve board is everything's just sort of at your fingertips. And so you can kind of access it pretty easily. If we were using more like just straight like outboard rack pre's or something like that, I probably would just be doing the soloing in Pro Tools. It's important to note too that we are monitoring back through Pro Tools. So actually, I'm sorry, John, you can give us 1 second. We're monitoring back through Pro Tools, so we're actually listening to what the recording is going to sound like after it's been digitized. If you do have the option to monitor before it hits Pro Tools, but it's just better to get more of an exact idea of what it's going to sound like on playback. Okay, cool. We'll get the 4 on the floor going again, please. So that's our D112. Okay, give us 1 second. That was our D112 just by itself, and it is going through one of the DBX VU 160s, which is a really fantastic compressor. I really just like the sound of the transformer inside of this. You know, the compression itself is great too, but even if you just run the tones through this, I found it really kind of like fattens up, especially the kick and snare. So we'll just be using it on the kick for this part. So I'm going to get it, I don't know how well you can see it, but there's sort of a below and above threshold reading on that. And I generally like it, so it's just kind of dimming that below threshold a little bit as he's playing. So we're retaining like a lot of the natural characteristics of the kick drum, but we're getting that fatness from running it through the electronics of that box. Okay, you can go ahead, please, with just the kick. Okay, see, it's just sort of flickering right there. We'll turn this down a little bit. And then we're gonna add in our other kick mics here. I'm gonna mute our original. So this is our 47 FET. Kind of has a nice pillowy sound. I'm gonna do a little bit of boosting on the low end and kind of cutting those low mids there. We'll hear them both together. Okay, cool. And I'll tell you what, now you could just do like kick and then snare. Give me 1 second here. So I did just bring in this, that sub kick mic, which generally is in there pretty quiet. I think it can muddy things up if it's not used appropriately or too much maybe. And then what I'm doing with the EQ on that is really just cutting any of the highs. So we're just getting a little bit of the lows. I think generally kind of going back to the knowing what tools you have at your disposal for both analog and plug-in stuff. You're going to find different EQs that sound good boosted or cut at certain frequency points. So one of the things I really love about this Neve is with these EQs you have a pretty big variety of options to kind of cut or boost. A lot of times the 33 cycle on these just sound really good in general, and then especially kind of combined with the cutting frequency of the low. So you kind of get this sort of notch that drops off on the end. So you're not getting too much like low information. Even though 33 is definitely low, you're kind of rounding it off afterwards. So you kind of have this boost with a round off, which kind of lets you get away with a bit more in terms of boosting low end, especially because you're kind of cleaning it up as you're doing it. Another big thing that I will tend to do is using the high frequency boosts on these. And a common technique would be to kind of get your high mid sort of dial back a little bit with a sharper Q. So the way the sort of bell of the EQ is becomes a little more narrow, so you're affecting less frequencies around the number that you have selected. So you're kind of dialing that back a little bit, which helps dial back some of the harshness, and then you can boost on top of that, which gives you kind of a lot of clarity. It's the reverse concept of what I just said with the sort of low-end kick drum, or low-end kind of boost and cut. Those sort of getting the EQ to kind of battle itself a little bit can yield some really interesting results, because you're taking away either the mud on the low end or the harshness and then boosting around that with more of like a shelf, so like an overall thing, which can lead some interesting results. So we'll go through and continue with the snare. So if we could do the kick and snare, please. So that's our snare top right there. And our snare bottom. And just 1 second here. You can hear with that snare bottom coming in how much detail with that 414 we're getting of the underneath the snare, which really kind of adds to the richness in a nice way. Okay, cool. Let's we're gonna hit the toms individually here, actually. So we'll start with that first floor tom. And we'll go, actually, I'm sorry, could you do the rack tom, please? There we go, that sounds a little better. Cool, then you could play the one next to it. Kind of one after the other, please. Okay, cool, thank you. So kind of before the shoot, we had already sort of dialed in some EQ on some of these drums, and that's sounding pretty good to me so far. So for the tom drums, what we're doing is we're doing some of that low end filtering there, and some of the